If you want to figure out the carbon emissions from your electricity use and you need to report on them, it's really not hard, very straightforward. Just follow a few simple rules and you'll be there in no time. Let's have a look. When we look about reporting our electricity use or the emissions from electricity use, there's broadly three ways of getting data into the software. You can look at the bills, i.e. take the bills from electricity company and just rekey them. That's one option. Benefit of that is everybody gets bills, don't they? So they're readily available. The downside obviously is it's got a lot of work, especially if you've got a lot of sites. Well, one of my clients has got, sort of like 300-400 sites. So rekeying those manually is not going to work for them. The second option is to log into the portal. Virtually all utility providers these days have an online web portal. Dial in there, find your account, and there's normally something that says like download a CSV, for example, of the past 12 months or the financial year that you're looking at. You can just download that and import it into software. Again, pretty straightforward. The easiest way by a long shot, is that depending on which software platform you've got, these days they have electronic links into the utility company. So as long as you go through it, there's a bit of faff making sure that you get the meter reference number right, and that's in the trade that's known as an MPAN, meter point access number, MPAN. But it's basically a serial number for the electricity meter. And if you can put that into the software, faff around to get the right one, the right meter, so you have to find that on the bill somewhere or have a look on the front of your meter. Once you've got that, then it just happens in the background. Don't have to do anything. You set it up once, get on with your life, and the software just drags it in, typically either every week or every month. Okay, so that's the easiest route. You might think that if you use renewable electricity, you're probably exempt from this, but that's not the case. There's a couple of tricks and tips about that. The first thing is all renewables do emit some form of carbon, or they're responsible for emitting some form of carbon. And that's because, the electricity is generally generated somewhere. So let's say, for example, you've got a wind farm in Wales, wind's blowing nicely onto a hill, the turbines spin, etc. They generate electricity, but you have to move it. I'm based in Oxford in the UK, so I have to move it from Wales to Oxford. That's not hard. You just pump it into the grid and the grid transfers it over wires to Oxford. But whenever you've got a wire, you've got resistance. And so, the further that the electricity has to come between where it's generated and where it's used, the more the resistance is going to be typically. So, it's not really very significant, but it's not zero either. Okay, so you can't just put your renewables in at zero. The other thing is that the equipment itself, when you put a wind farm in, it does need maintaining. Someone has to go up there and just make sure everything's working correctly, and that, whilst it's not generating, sort of emitting carbon directly from that activity, it is causing, emissions to be made. Someone has to drive a van from A to B, etc., etc. So that's the sort of second point. The third point is just be careful about renewable energy certificates and renewable energy obligations and all that. I've tried to look underneath the certificates used by a couple of my clients. So a couple of my clients have said, look, it's zero, here's the proof. And they give you this nice sort of certificate, the utility company does, and it's got reference number on and stuff like that. But when you look the reference number up, you very soon start hitting either a brick wall, which we did in a couple of cases, or B, something that says, if you want to know more, just call our call center. 15 minutes later, press option 1, press option 7, press option 8, and you end up speaking to an operator who says, I just haven't got a clue what you're talking about. Every time I've tried to verify a renewable energy certificate, a renewable energy obligation certificate, I've not been able to do it. That's really annoying. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. Maybe my team were looking in the wrong place, but we couldn't do it. The problem with that is there are some dodgy certificates out there, okay? There shouldn't be, but there are. There's nothing stopping someone from issuing 2 certificates instead of 1, or 3, or 20, or 200, or maybe you've got a hydro dam in India and you buy the certificates off of them. I don't know, without some clarity in the market, I treat all those certificates with, you know, an element of, are you really sure? Okay, so just be careful of the certificate and don't put too much faith in that. When we talk about how much carbon emissions come from renewables, it is pretty small. So the best sort of renewable will be wind, onshore wind, which has got 11 grams of CO2e per kilowatt hour. So that's 0.011 of a kilogram, which is 0.000011 of a ton. So it's tiny, but it's not zero, okay? Second, it would be offshore at 12 grams, then nuclear, etc. Then, you know, there's a whole chart. And if you want to see the chart a little bit more and see what your renewables actually emit, have a look in my book, Net Zero for Business. It's on about page 90 odd, something like that, and it lists them all out and gives a little bit more detail about renewable energy. But you know, I don't want to detract from the fact that if you have got old style energies, just change it to renewable. It might not be perfect, but it's the best we've got out there. Now let's talk about accuracy of electricity data. It's not what you think it is, basically. If you haven't got a smart meter, a half-hourly meter with links that transmits your sort of meter reads automatically, it's always going to be an estimate. So when you see the number on your bill, if you haven't got a smart meter, that is an estimate, okay? Even if you phoned up yesterday and gave them the meter read, today's reading is still an estimate. And the way they work that out is they apply industry average curves, and there's a lot of, well, I've read a very interesting paper on how they calculate those curves and for different areas, for different regions. Basically, this curve goes like that, and they say, well, if I've got that point and that point, I'll interpolate, you know, estimate all the other points on that graph, and that's what they charge you. So to start with, if you haven't got a smart meter, it's always an estimate. If you've got a situation where you're typing bills in, then bet you'll end up with some missing data. And you know, what do? Two routes. First, if it's under 10%, if you're missing, say, 1 month or maybe 2 months of data from a year, do you know what? Just averages it. Don't worry about it. Okay. It is along the lines of everybody has missing data. And if you've got under 10% missing data, it's not a problem. If you're talking about scope 3 emissions, by the way, that 10% changes to 30%. So if you're better than 30%, you're okay. But electricity is scope 2, and we hope to get better than 10%. If you're dealing with governmental reporting, that 10%, by the way, drops to 2%, although there's a little sideline saying if it goes to 3, we're not going to really worry. So 3% is the figure we work to internally. So, you know, yes, if you've got a missing month, it does make a difference, you know, depending on the size of amount of energy that you expect is going to be missing. You know, if you've got a massive, great big load, missing a month of that is obviously worse than missing a month of a small load system, etc. But under 10%, don't worry. If it's over 10%, you've got a couple of things you can do, but one of the things to look at is to just estimate, okay? And if you're really worried about it, you know, make a note in the report that you've estimated this data, and you can always go back then and go and ask a utility company for, you know, the rest of the bills if you're retyping it, or better still, let's say, go back to what I said earlier, get a CSV download or electronic link. The last thing to mention here is if you haven't got a smart meter and you want to do net zero, get a smart meter. You know, either fit a retrofit meter, and you know, I can point you to links if you need them, but we use a couple of companies time and time again. They're not expensive, about 200 and something pounds to buy, a couple hundred quid for an electrician to fit it, and that gives you the half-hour data. And if you're trying to, you know, manage your electricity use, if you're trying to do that on estimates, it's just, you know, you got all sorts of problems. Fit the smart meter, get accurate data, and then if you do something on day 1, you can see the effect on day 2. You know, say you turn all the lights off, you can have a look and see what that does to your electricity use. If you've got a smart meter and you haven't got a smart meter, then you won't be able to do it. A bit later on, one of the later videos, I'll be talking about a way that you can reduce your energy down. It's probably the #1 most effective and cost-effective way that I can think of doing it. It's called baseload analysis or baseload reduction. And if you haven't got a smart meter, you won't be able to do it. So my parting words to you are, if you haven't got a smart meter, get yourself one. Either retrofit or call up the utility company and say, can I have a smart meter? Certainly, and get one arranged, okay? So there you go. That's electricity data in a nutshell for you. I hope that was useful. To recap, yes, you need it. Bills, CSV, electronic links. Renewable energy, it's small, but it isn't zero. I think we actually write it down as zero if it's minuscule, but it isn't zero, and if you put it in at zero, it's not entirely correct, but maybe it's small enough not to worry about. But there are some emissions to do with renewable energy. And accuracy, if you're better than 10%, you're okay. If not, have a word with the utility company to get your bills, and think about getting a smart meter installed, either a secondary smart meter, or change the main meter you've got to a smart meter with the utility company. There you go. I hope that was useful. If it was, please consider going onto Amazon, having a look at my book, and if you want to give it a nice review, then I'll love you forever and a day. All right, see you next time.